Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War Online commentary. In this particular ladder battle, I will be piloting the Dwarves, and I'm going to be facing off against an Empire opponent who has quite a bit of handgunners over here. Actually, I think that's at least 4 groups. I don't know if he has more in the back, but a lot of ranged firepower there. So as far as my army composition goes, thankfully for me, I do have a front line of Longbeards who are armored and shielded, and also have charged defense against large, so that's also going to be very, very good against those Demogryph Knights he has over there. And again, they will be quite efficient at absorbing that missile fire, so that's definitely a plus for me. I also brought a group of Quarrelers with great weapons. That was actually a little bit of a mistake. I don't think I meant to bring the great weapons, but I just clicked on that option. And hey, at the end of the day, the Empire does have a lot of armored infantry units, and most of the cavalry who will be diving these Quarrelers are armored. So it could be argued that the great weapons aren't a terrible choice against Empire. In the backline, this, as you guys know, in that last video, I had a little bit of fun with the Iron Drakes. So I was still kind of on that roll, and I decided to just bring another group just to see what happened, and they definitely were not as effective this game, as my opponent did not bring a steam tank. But regardless, I have a group of Iron Drakes with the Trollhammer torpedoes, and they are pretty good against Empire leadership, like the General of the Empire, and those other heavily armored Empire lords. As you guys can see, where is he? Right here, the General of the Empire. He does have 85 armor. He is armored, and he is considered a large unit. So if the Iron Drakes can get decent, square shots against them, they will do pretty good damage and, pay their dues. So I also have a Thane. He is rocking the double potion, and I brought a group of Hammers. I've actually been on a bit of a kick with these guys lately and have really been enjoying them. In my traditional Dwarvish army comp, I usually get 2 groups of Slayers, but again, the Hammers, they're heavy, they're armored. They do a ton of damage, and they're armor piercing. A lot of those armor piercing type, not armor piercing, but damage dealer type units like Forsaken, they don't have that armor piercing aspect to them, but these guys can really, really crack through that armored front line of the Empire. So I've been having a lot of fun with them in this matchup. Then I have another group of Longbeards behind them in support, a group of Slayers, additional Longbeards, and then of course for leadership I have UNGRIM Iron Fist. He's kind of my go-to. I don't use the High King that much just because I like this guy so much thematically, and he's just so cool with that Axe of Dargo, which is pretty solid. It gives him additional weapon damage as well as armor piercing, so he is really, really good at cutting through armored leadership. Then of course a Runesmith with all of his popular upgrades. So, as far as my opponent's army composition goes, he has an Amber Wizard, so he's probably going to be looking to summon a Manticore. And Manticores are very annoying against Dwarves. They can usually dive bomb your, valuable targets and that type of thing. And to be honest, when I'm playing against Empire, I don't even bother bringing siege units anymore, because with the potions, the General of the Empire can usually dive in and do serious damage with the Manticore. And then, whatever damage you're able to get out of them, they can just potion up. So I found that siege units are not that cost effective against Empire, and if you were to bring Empire cannons, they can outrange most of your siege anyways. So personally, I do not like to bring those type of things. As far as his army composition goes, he has a front line of handgunners. These are pretty good against Dwarves. They do have armor piercing capabilities, which is essential, especially when you're, having to shoot at Longbeards, who are very, very sturdy, armored, and shielded units. So definitely a good choice on his part. He has a secondary line of Spearmen, so a lot of Spearmen, actually. It looks like he kind of just skimped out on his infantry and on his fodder infantry and wanted to invest more in the Greatswords, which is a good choice. Greatswords are armor piercing, and they're quite efficient at cutting through Dwarvish units. But again, these Spearmen, definitely just fodder. They're very cheap, I believe, at only 300 resources. Dwarves aren't really going to field any anti-large, but I think he was just pinching pennies and trying to get as many Greatswords as he could. And it looks like he has 4 full groups of Greatswords here, so definitely a very, very tough back line of infantry here. And then, of course, he has Demogryph Knights, the standard anti-infantry armor piercing, which is smart. He did not need to bring halberds, and he made a wise choice there. So without further ado, let's get started. So both of our armies are advancing up the hill here, and he does get that immediate sight. Of course, the Empire's going to be able to climb the hill a lot faster with this Amber Wizard, and I think my opponent, he didn't want to race me up there and meet me at the top, so I think what he wanted to do was position just down here so that when I get up to the top, I just take a massive volley. Because if you guys look, he has 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of handgunners. So my first group that gets up here is going to take massive fire damage. So, and again, I couldn't see that yet, so I didn't know what to expect. My opponent does come in with the Amber Wizard and cast a Flock of Doom, which actually does a little bit of damage across the board. You guys can see that there's pretty decent HP loss. Look at that. That's they're down to what, 4,400, 43, 42. That's a big HP hit to those guys and that group as well, and those guys. My whole front line took a huge hit just from that, so a very, very cost-effective spell for him. His Amber Wizard did take some Quarreler fire, and I believe it did take a few shots from the Iron Drakes, who are able to do pretty good damage against it. Iron Drakes will do good against Amber Wizard. He's not armored, so the armor piercing isn't as much of a factor, but he is large. So again, that will come into play with the anti-large ability of the Iron Drakes. So I finally get to the high ground and I'm able to see his army. I was definitely happy that I was able to get here first, because a lot of times with dwarves you will not get to the high ground first, but that was definitely something that I was happy about. But unfortunately for me, I am going to take some serious missile fire right now, as well as another flock of doom. So my troops are taking pretty heavy fire, but if anyone's going to take this type of fire, it's going to be Longbeards. They're very, very resilient, and that's what you want to use them for. So he's getting some pretty shots. Meanwhile, in the back line, my opponent did land this Manticore. He was trying to take out my Quarrelers and my valuable range units, but I did keep the Slayers back there, who haven't really done much, if any, damage to it yet. I mean, they did a little bit, but regardless, they were able to chase it off, which was the most important thing. So unfortunately for me, he does cycle up and land on my Iron Drakes, but one nice thing about Iron Drakes is they have 120 armor. They are extremely sturdy. So again, this Manticore doesn't have armor piercing capability, so these Iron Drakes are going to last quite a while against this Manticore, and I'm able to get a nice envelop with my Slayers, as well as have my Quarrelers turn and start to shoot at that Amber Wizard. So while that's going on back here in the front line, we're just engaging across the front, and keep in mind he does have a lot of these cheap kind of spearman type units, and he does charge these Demogryph Knights right into these Longbeards, which is definitely good for me. I want these guys to get tied up, and right here in the middle I get my Runesmith right in the center of all my forces here, so he's buffing here, and these troops will also reap the benefit of that. And then I pull, I believe, my Thane over here, and of course this group of Longbeards I kind of just used in the wing over there. So kind of my whole thought process was, I saw that he invested very heavily in the center area. He sent Longswords, he sent Demogryph Knights, so I sent UNGRIM in there with the Axe of Dargo, and he will absolutely chop through those guys. And then I also sent my Hammerers, who, with the armor piercing, they're just going to cut through these Demogryph Knights. So him losing these, and they're already shaken, he lands his General of the Empire to kind of like match fire with fire. But again, I have a really strong force here with that Runesmith and UNGRIM and all of that. And now that my troops are kind of tied up with these handgunners aren't as effective. They kind of don't have that opportune angle anymore. And something that he perhaps could have done is, if he had swung this group out and around, because he did have more infantry than me, and I wasn't as mobile by any means, so he could have definitely maneuvered these guys around, shot them in the sides or in the back. That would have been something that was good. So in the back line, I was able to chase off that Manticore. The Slayers did a very good job. And now the Iron Drakes and the Quarrelers are just shooting at this Amber Wizard and doing great damage. And you can see those Iron Drakes really chunked that guy. So essentially the Iron Drakes and the Quarrelers were able to take that Amber Wizard out of the fight, as well as the Manticore. So I was definitely happy. But I kept the Slayers here because I figured he might fly back and try some funny business with this Manticore, but eventually they will move up. So over here, the fight's going pretty well. I was able to pull a group of Longbeards around, and they're able to get right on these handgunners, and that is a great situation for them. Because, again, the handgunners are slightly faster with the 33 run speed to the 26, but every time they have to stop and turn and shoot, they're going to get caught up to by those Longbeards, so I was definitely happy about that. So, again, my main focal point of my tactical investment was in the center here. I brought these Hammerers in, who did take some losses against Demogryph Knights, but again, this is his strongest point of his army, and if I can crack this, then you guys can see the floodgates will be open. I'll have access to these troops, I can chase these guys down, and as you guys can see over here, I did send the Thane to deal with that group, because he actually was bringing those around and was getting pretty cost-effective fire against these troops here. So the Thane is going to go kind of chase those guys off. I probably should have pulled him back to go after this group and just cycle, but my opponent does cast another Flock of Doom, which was upgraded, and it was doing, I was taking pretty serious losses from it. Thankfully for me, you can see a lot of the Empire troops are, starting to have morale issues and, those type of things here in the center, and they're broken. The Dwarves, even though this group of Hammers is extremely damaged, they're still confident despite it all, and they're at like 20% HP, so I was happy about that. And now that my Slayers are here in the front line, they're able to back up these Longbeards, and even though it's not an ideal situation, they're not fighting a large unit. If you look at Slayers, they do have very, very high combat stats. They have pretty good melee attack, really good weapon strength, and are just an all-around great unit. So over here, these Longbeards, again, the Dwarves are just awesome. I mean, these guys are 500 HP, and they still haven't broken. They're still fighting to the death. Just such a great unit, tying up both Spearmen and Longsword, so definitely very cost-effective there. I was able to, now that the flying threat was dealt with, I was able to move up my Quarrelers, and I'm just using them to shoot at these type of units. But if this Manticore lands, they do, will hopefully be able to generate some, decent results with those great weapons against these Demogryph Knights and this Manticore, even though it's not a terribly heavily armored unit. But again, Dwarvish missile units are pretty sturdy. And the Iron Drakes are kind of here covering them, and they're blasting right into this Manticore. And and these Demogryph Knights, and I also pull a group of Longbeards to help. But really, this has kind of become the epicenter of the battle. It's very pitched, and unfortunately for my opponent, in very close battles like this, if UNGRIM is still in good health, which he is, he can seriously just take like an entire group of greatswords by himself. And I do still have the Runesmith, and his Amber Wizard and Manticore did take some serious damage, and these Iron Drakes are still doing pretty good, taking those Demogryph charges like champs. And, they do have decent weapon strength, I guess, and, their melee attack isn't awful, but the big thing with them is they do have 120 armor, so they've been taking a beating throughout the game, and they're still in here fighting, so definitely can't complain. So this is the really pitched battle. You can still see those same hammers with the Slayer King here, in here doing pretty good, and UNGRIM's definitely in his element. You can see him. He just cracked a whole group of greatswords there, and, I'm very happy about that. Over here, these Slayers are still fighting as well, and, I kind of just use them to tie up the General of the Empire. They will get the anti-large bonus from that, and they'll do pretty well. And with this Runesmith supporting them, and the Runesmith of course is still in range to buff all these guys, so definitely very cost effective there. And the General did use his potion, which I believe was his last one, as he did use the potion of toughness earlier in the battle. So at this point, you just got to get it, got to get him to use it, because you can't crack him without it. But regardless, he still is taking pretty serious leadership hit. He was down to like sub 30, so that's another thing. Again, the Dwarves' leadership is so hard to crack. So even if the battle seems to be favoring your opponent, keep fighting, because you never know if you'll be able to pull it out with a morale win. So over here, I do have a group of long beards fighting these greatswords. It's definitely a rough matchup for them, as these guys, armor piercing, they have pretty high combat stats, and they're good. The Longbeards are going to have a hard time, trading with them in terms of just pure numbers, but they're doing pretty well over there and holding the line. And mainly, I just need them to hold while UNGRIM is able to generate value. And I still have this group of Quarrelers who's in pretty good health, and they're shooting into these Spearmen. These Iron Drakes, unfortunately, have been tied up for a lot of this battle, but they did get some decent shots earlier, and I'm trying to cycle them back up the hill to have them get some shots, and it's been a little tough for sure, but thankfully they are very sturdy. And you can see the Slayer King here is just the boss, and you can see this whole mountain of carnage right here, and the General of the Empire was right here, so I saw a good opportunity. He was trying to take out the Runesmith, which is a very, very good play. And Runesmiths are very sturdy as well. I mean, he has 120 armor. These Dwarven units are very sturdy. And UNGRIM, with the, when he gets on you, he can really just chunk this guy down. And he was out of potions at this point, so I knew that if I could, get a nice little quick, chunk on this General of the Empire and drive him off, I think I would have a, pretty good chance of winning. Even though if you look at it overhead, I have some Quarrelers here, a Runesmith, UNGRIM, and I think that's pretty much it. I do have the Thane over here. So the Thane chased off a bunch of handgunners, which was very valuable, because if those handgunners had been able to just sit in an arc here and just shoot at UNGRIM, they would have, put him down pretty hard. So the Thane is coming back, and he still has both of his potions. So that's pretty huge. And, the Rune of Wrath and Rune is very good at finishing off low life units here. So again, it's mainly just the Dwarf Lords versus a bunch of beat up infantry and, Empire troops. And the General of the Empire is broken. He did take some serious losses. He can definitely not match UNGRIM Iron Fist in terms of leadership, so it's definitely a very pitched battle. And this poor guy, he's just been taking gunfire all day. If you guys take a look, he's nice and bloodied up. He's got his shield up. He's ready to come help his buddy, the Slayer King, over here. And none of these units are really in good health. And these Iron Drakes, I'm telling you guys, even though they weren't the most cost effective, they're still in it. They're still here fighting, and I definitely can't complain, as they're gonna take some decent little pot shots over here and hopefully be able to drive off the remainder of the opponent's troops. And these Quarrelers, I mean, they're not pushovers in melee. With the 27 weapon strength and 27 melee attack, they actually fought off those Spearmen really well. Were able to defend themselves. So I guess the armor piercing wasn't terrible. And they are taking shots, and most of his low tier infantry are broken at this point. And he does bring in his General of the Empire. I think this was his last stand. He wanted to get some sort of a dive and really cheese out my general, but you can see the Iron Drake shooting at this guy, as well as the Quarrelers, and that immediately shatters him. He's had enough of that, and definitely a good choice on his part getting out of there. So, and of course I still had the Thane, so things weren't terrible, but that was a really close battle. I mean, all I had was Quarrelers, Runesmith, UNGRIM, and a Thane left, really, and a few Longbeards here. So as far as the breakdown goes, I mean, you guys can see that these hammers just huge value, because he invested very heavily in that center with committed greatswords, with the Demogryph Knights, with his general, and all that stuff. And those hammers were able to retaliate with UNGRIM, and look at the kills they got there. And a lot of these are on Demogryph Knights and very, very valuable units, so huge value generated there. I definitely cannot complain. And my other units did pretty well, and the Thane did a good job of chasing off a good 2 or 3 groups of the handgunners. So very, very good there. And you know, a lot of this battle did come down to leadership, because you can see he had a lot of units that were still alive, and you know, my units basically all fought to the death. Like, all of these Longbeards got completely wiped out, and this other group was still fighting at the end. So definitely love the leadership of the dwarf. So my opponent's army composition, his greatswords generated pretty good value. He did get some good initial fire with these handgunners, but you know, once that one group of Longbeards was able to break through, as well as the Thane, I was able to handle them quite well. So definitely a good game to CMA Castle. Look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and just wanted to thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate the support, and more content coming soon. And I'll definitely try and mix up my my compositions a little bit more. It's just been tough to get some good games when I try the like flame cannons and other things like this, because I usually just get crushed, or you know, it's definitely a tough game. But I'm gonna keep working on it, guys. So thanks again for bearing with me on that. All right, guys, have an excellent night, and take care.